All right, time for another video. Let's see. I'm gonna talk about tipping culture since I'm just going down this right side. Um, so I don't know if anyone watches from a different country, but uh, I know like in some countries, like Japan, for example, tipping is offensive if you do it. I don't know exactly why, but they don't tip in Japan. I'm pretty sure people don't tip in Australia or something because I know we had tourists from I'm pretty sure it was like Australia or something that they didn't tip or somewhere over there. But like the tipping culture of tipping or not, and also how much to tip is different in different countries. Like I know in China they tip about 10%, if at all. But yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to say if you travel to a different country, you should do your research on how to be a functional, decent human being in their society because you're going somewhere that uh, you you're visiting and they live there, and that's their, let's say, Japan or Hawaii or Europe. Like you're visiting them, so I think it's good to do your homework before you go so you don't make an ass of yourself, basically. This isn't specific to the tipping thing and people coming to Hawaii, but it's just like certain cultures find certain things offensive, or like they'll look at you weird because you did something wrong, like you stuck your chopsticks upwards in rice. So be respectful of cultures and places that you go by doing your research before you go. Anyways, back to the tipping part of restaurants specifically. So also, why has it become such a prevalent thing that tipping whenever possible is like, it's like, oh, tip, 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 tip. I think it's just another way to for certain industries to subsidize the business owners to subsidize their workers' wages by passing it on to the customer and calling the customer cheap or whatever if they decide not to tip and not to pay what a business owner should be paying. But then that goes both ways too. Sometimes you're forced to build a tip into it if you the customers say like, oh, it's too expensive or whatever, and then it just becomes unfeasible to run a business unless you subsidize your workers pay with tip. So that's a whole thing. But like restaurants, obviously, Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, takeout, tattoo artists, taxi drivers, delivery drivers, tipping is getting way too crazy. It's like everyone's trying to, oh, tip, 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 tip. Soon you're gonna end up tipping your person ringing you out at Costco because, and then if you use the checkout machine yourself, you don't have to tip. But if a person rings you up, you gotta tip them. uh, and then there's like, I understand the logic behind tipping, which is I don't know. Everyone's logic on tipping is different, but I think it's depending on what field it is. If if it's somewhere like restaurants where it's so messed up that one restaurant can't fix it, it needs to be basically a all or nothing where every restaurant has to fix it to change the mentality of how people view tipping in restaurants. That's kind of like permanently messed up already, because I wouldn't even say you need to change 51% of tipping in restaurants to be able to change the whole system, everyone's perception of the system. You'd have to change like 75% or something, because it's already ingrained in people's minds that they have to tip at restaurants in the US anyways. So to change it in the other direction, you would have to make a disproportional amount of people do it, which is like 75%. Then people will be like, okay, this is the new normal now. Because 50-50, that's not new normal. That's like 50-50, and people rather lean towards doing what they've already known. So 50-50 is not good enough. It has to be 75-25-ish. So, and the only way that would happen is if it was like a law or something where that passed and it just said tipping is not allowed in sit down food establishments, takeout, delivery, and all that stuff. If they just said it's banned, then restaurants and everyone else would be forced to adapt to it, which is to build that tipped cost into the bottom line, which is actually a good thing because it guarantees, like, let's say this guy tips 15%, this guy tips 20, this guy tips 200%, this guy tips 0%. At the end of the day, the average is, let's say, 20%, which like some days the servers would make a ton, some days they would get gypped because they made less than 20. But if a business was able to just increase their prices by, let's say, 18%, overall it's less dollars per as compared to the 20% average from earlier. But because it's leveled out, because it's a bank account of the restaurant, they can pay consistent wages, because that's the problem with serving. You make a ton some days and you make nothing some other days, and it's just like every day's a gamble. You work Friday or you work Tuesday. Obviously, you make more on Friday, and then it's like time of year and like how many other servers and all that stuff. But if you just paid a flat wage, and the only thing that changes when it gets busier is you have more people on staff, that naturally balances itself out. Like if you're doing 10 covers, you have one server. If you're doing 20 covers, you have two servers, something like that. And the wages of the front of the house gets smoothed out over the whole year. So they don't have to like bulk up and hibernate like a polar bear with their bank account. So that's one thing. And then another thing is servers make a disproportionate amount of money compared to the kitchen staff. By funneling all the tips into the bottom line, you can distribute it fairly. But also, here's where capitalism comes into play, because if if you turn your restaurant into a no tip restaurant, and the servers used to make 30 and the cooks used to make 10, but then in this new system you made them equal, $20 an hour, $20 an hour. If that server could get paid more at a different restaurant, whether it be a standard tipping style or the new tipping style, if they can make more elsewhere, capitalism, they'll naturally just go work there. And then if you can't find anyone to work for $20 an hour, then you don't have any servers. And in 2020, what happens from there? Well, it's either close down or pay the servers more, which will tip it more like this. But I don't think the tipping in this direction would be so extreme as to bring it back to $10 and $30 an hour. I think you'll be able to find a happier medium with like, let's say, 24-16. So yeah, this is a very gray area, because when you fix somebody's problem, you create a problem for somebody else. And servers don't like to make less money, and that's kind of obvious. So in my restaurants, we just got rid of the servers, and my kitchen staff are the servers. So that's how I solved it in my restaurant. But everyone can do whatever the future tipping culture ends up being. I really don't care, because my restaurants are doing well based on this system we currently run. And I know most restaurants can't do it because kitchen staff are usually sweaty and grimy, and kitchen people that like swearing a lot and that type of stuff. whereas servers have to be polished and forward, front facing, guest facing. So it it works in my restaurant because it's kitchen staff who are aesthetic and customer service capable people in general. How much time I got? Oh, it's 10 minutes already. Wow. What else do I have to say about tipping? Oh, I personally tip. I tip 15% if I have a horrible experience. I tip 20% if it's less than average. I would say my average tip is 20%. I take the number from the bottom and I round it up and add on a couple dollars. If I just round it up if it's a small bill, but if it's like a bigger bill, I'll round up and then I'll tack on a couple dollars. Because if you can't afford to go out to eat, or if you can't afford to tip, you shouldn't be going out to eat. That's one thing. But like, if you just think about it, you tipping an extra $3 that pushes a 15% tip to a 20% tip, what's $3 to you versus somebody else's happiness of, because you're basically telling them, good job, you did your job. Or if you tip them extra, good job, you did extra good. So you got tipped extra. And it's kind of like spreading happiness, but it's money. So I don't know. Well, we'll just leave it at that. But servers do get paid a lot. I know in Waikiki, for example, I've heard that bartenders there, they make, because it's a hotel, they make, on like the really busy days, well, every day, their normal hourly is like $20 an hour. And the bartenders on a really busy day, they would rake in like over $1,000 in tips. So that's crazy.